All right. Let's see, we got folks coming in. So I'm going to give them a moment or so and let folks come in, and then we're going to jump in and really get this, put the show on for the people that you're really here for, not me, but our great panel and our great conversation that we're going to have from here. So I'll give them a moment or so, let folks come in, and then we're going to get going. As you are coming in, reminder, as we have with our past few webinars, there will be limited interaction, but that does not mean no interaction for the individuals in attendance. Because we tend to have conversations that can be sensitive for some, or others can be a lot. I'm just gonna say it that way. Like, it's the end of the week, so the social work stuff kind of goes out the door. I'm gonna have a bit more of a general voice today than I may have had in the past. But because some of our topics can be sensitive conversations, what we don't want to do is have disruptions based off of unnecessary interaction and engagement. So at the end, at the very least, we'll be able to get to the Q&A chat. Everyone should have a Q&A question bar at the bottom of your screen to be able to ask questions through, either anonymously or using your name. Either way is perfectly fine, no worries there. The goal is to be able to help support a conversation that no matter where you are when it comes to your work or you want to work with international communities, you can jump in and be able to engage here. So for those that are well into the work, hopefully you'll be able to learn something more here. For individuals who are just kind of trying to figure out, like, what does that even mean? This is a great starting point for you as well. So you'll have a chance to interact and engage at the least at the very end, time permitting, when it comes to the Q&A chat. Otherwise, wherever you are, feel free to get comfortable with that. I think a lot of times when we have our meetings that we tend to take this at a, let me sit at my computer, my desk, my phone in an uncomfortable space, got your headphones in, tune in, do what you need to do to be able to really focus in on the great information you're going to hear today. You see in front of you, if you are here for the RASE International Communities Health, Safety, and Wellbeing webinar, you are in the exact right place. If you're not familiar with me, I'm Matthew Mills. I am a lecturer in the School of Social Work and the director for RASE, the Race and Social Equity Academy. We've been doing these webinars since about the end of January, and so far we've covered the LGBTQIA+ community. Yesterday we did a webinar with women's health, safety, and well-being, and today we're wrapping up before spring break for international communities' health, safety, and well-being. Our overall goal is, again, just to facilitate a great conversation that's timely, right? Not all of us, you all in attendance, you all that are watching this, wherever you're watching from, our panelists are not all social workers, but do all have the heart of social justice and the heart to want to support communities wherever they may be. You will likely hear some social work stuff involved. I'll say three of our panelists, 2 BSW students, and an MSW student are social workers and going there to have that professional status as well. Wherever you are, whatever the thing that is that you do professionally, humanly, the goal is just to really engage in a fantastic conversation to support the knowledge and awareness of the health, safety, and well-being for international communities in a very broad sense, right? So to get started, I'm going to pass off to our panelists to give a brief who you are, what do you do, introduction that we have here. I'm going to walk down the line here, so I'm going to start with Caroline. Can you tell us or give us some information about yourself and for your introduction?
Yeah, so hey everybody, my name is Caroline. I am a MSW student at University of North Carolina, Charlotte. I am also interning at Phillips Academy, which I help middle and high school students with special needs. As a Palestinian American, I have always breathed and lived social justice since living here. And honestly, I continue to do that as like living here as a privilege and just sharing what I know and just standing up what is right, whether it's for my cause or for any other cause. So I'm also a learner and a provider to educate anybody. So I'm really thankful to be here, and shout out to Professor Mills. So thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. Jocelyn.
Hi guys, my name is Jocelyn. I'm a current BSW student at Charlotte. I'm currently in the process of getting an internship. I did get it. I will be starting in the fall at a charter school from K through 8th. I will be working with students. I'm very excited for that. I'm very passionate about social work. It's always been a passion of mine to just want to enhance the well-being of others, educate and advocate for all populations. And coming from the Hispanic community as a first generation, we see a lot of different things, and just being able to enhance my learning on certain topics is very important for me. And I hope to one day just be able to be the change that a lot of people need right now, especially in times like this. And I appreciate Professor Mills for giving me the opportunity to talk today, and I'm excited. Thank you.
Jocelyn. Terza, Dr. Lima Neves.
Oh, sorry, y'all. Good morning. I apologize for my voice. Speaking of international communities, I just came back from my home country of Cape Verde, West Africa, and I don't bounce back like I used to back in the day, where you hop 3 continents in less than 24 hours and then you can just go right back to work. That doesn't work for me anymore. It makes me sick now, which is why I sound a little bit raspy right now, battling a cold. But I want to thank Professor Matthew for inviting me into this space with all of you, my new friends now, I see. My name is Terza Lima Neves. I was born and raised in the Cape Verde Islands, came to the US as a teenager. I am a faculty member in political science at Johnson C. Smith University. I am the co-founder of the Poderosa Conference. It's an international conference on Cabo Verdean women. We provide a platform for those who identify as Cape Verdean women to to share their success and their challenges, and to, what I like to say, cupcake with each other and celebrate all the wins. And that happens in the heart of the Cape Verdean community, which is Providence, Rhode Island. But I'm also a very active member of the African community here in Charlotte, which is a growing community. Johnson C. Smith University is a very diverse student body, a very diverse faculty and staff body. And so we've dealt with a lot there. And so I'm happy to be part of this conversation so that we can continue to move us forward.
Thank you, Dr. Lima Neves. And Rebecca, last but not least.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rebecca. I am also a BSW student. It's my 3rd year. I also secured an internship for the fall. It's for a counseling service. So I'm very excited to start that. I am a first-gen college student. I am Mexican American, and I come from immigrant parents, which is what has fueled my passion for social work and advocacy, being able to witness firsthand just how international communities are very often overlooked. It's just fueled all that for me. So being able to engage in this discussion and be able to share my thoughts with such an amazing group of people is something that I'm very excited for.
Yes. Thank you all. Thank you all so much for that, right? Yeah, so again, we are going to have a great conversation. So wherever you are, whatever your walk of life is, if you have questions, feel free to toss those in as you hear information, or just have your thoughts come in. It won't derail the conversation. It just kind of only helps to enhance the interaction that we will have at the end here as well. So thanks to everyone. And also, for those that are hearing about these internships, our MSW and BSW students are required to, at a certain point in time, partake in an internship placement to be able to enhance their education, right? So that these students have already gotten theirs, they're in theirs, they're getting ready for it. Like, that's another task to take on that students, I don't think, get enough credit for, as far as what they're going through, what they're doing as they're trying to learn, and here also be a part of a great component of advocacy as well. So props to the students here and everyone for the work that you're doing for your communities as well. All right, let me move the slide forward. So for what you're going to get for today, learning objectives, we always have this piece as far as like what you're going to get for it. The idea here, and this should look very familiar to everyone that's attended a webinar so far, because it's really the same kind of concept, right? We want to increase your awareness of the community, encourage allyship and inclusive behavior, promote access to health and community resources, and understand how to ethically work with the diverse international communities, right? So it's really, it's broad and encompassing, but very important that we understand who we're working with, how do we work with them, what are the needs, and what are the ways we can support these communities in the broadest senses possible, right? So we'll stop the screen share there, and let's get into the talk. So for you all, and we'll start here this conversation, with, guys, if you don't mind, how do you want me to address? Because I want to make these conversations as general as possible, but I know some folks like their titles. Should it be Dr. Lima Neves or Terza?
Terza.
All right.
The respect comes from the way people treat you, not titles. So Terza's fine with me.
Fair, and appreciative. So Terza, I'm going to start this conversation with you for the first question of, from your experience, right? You talked about a lot of experience when it comes to being from Cape Verde, your work with African women in the local communities, and in a very intersectional space of where you exist and how you exist in the world right now. From your experience and your expertise, what are some of the needs and challenges related to the health, safety, and well-being for international communities that you're seeing right now?
Yeah, I think it's also for me, it's important for me to mention that um, there's the stigma that most undocumented people are, there's a focus on the Latinx, Latino community. And so it's important for me to mention that I'm also a formerly undocumented person in the United States, so that we sort of, just reframe and reshape the way. I'm a naturalized American citizen now, but I was once an undocumented person who lived those fears that and those complexities of all that we're about to talk about today, right? So it's important. And I think that some of the needs and the challenges that we face as communities, even though I'm a naturalized citizen, I'm forever an immigrant, I think, is related to the lack of understanding and compassion and patience that we're facing, lack of understanding. But also the respect, right? Some of the challenges that we face, but also the respect and towards policies and laws, because we belong, right? We belong. And so there needs to be, so I'm not only asking for the respect and understanding, compassion and patience towards communities, but I'm also asking for laws and policies to be respected, and to be passed and to be considered, because we're all humans. So those are some of the things that where I would like the initial thoughts on that question.
Thank you. And as we go, panelists, feel free to jump in as you have. But Rebecca, let's go with you next. Well, from your experience, what are you seeing here?
Yeah, I'd like to add on to what Terza was saying, how like it comes down to respect and how at the end of the day we're all humans regardless of our immigration status. And I'd like to bring up Trump's administration. But I've been seeing like videos on social media of like ASMR deportation, and it's just the current administration has been, I feel like, ridiculing marginalized communities, and we're talking about like Hispanic immigrants in this case, and it's just very concerning to see. It's very concerning because we are all humans and we all deserve empathy and respect, and with this current administration it doesn't seem like that's what we are receiving, and it's just very concerning to me. Yeah.
Caroline.
Honestly, like what they said, my parents were immigrants, especially my dad specifically. He was very young when he came here. And, it was a culture shock for him. I think that's a highlight as well. When coming in a country that you've never been before, completely different, can be very like the fear or just like honestly just shocked. So when my dad came here, he really worked hard. Of course, he made mistakes along the way, but he learned from it, and he did get his citizenship. And then when he brought my mom, he did the same thing. And obviously, that's when I came, was born here. I think if my dad didn't do that, and we would probably be still in Palestine. So it's honestly like the culture shock is a highlight to it. because some people just don't know, like, that, especially Americans, they think that everyone around them know what's going on, but in reality, when someone from a different country comes in here, they really don't know. But I can go on, like, especially with like the Syrian refugees. That one is something that really holds to me, but we'll continue the question with the rest because I don't want to go on.
Thank you, Caroline. Jocelyn.
Sorry. As Caroline mentioned, it's just like a culture shock for many that don't know what it's like to, migrate from another country or have the same opportunities as other. And like specifically like the Hispanic community, like many individuals, they always face like prejudice and stereotypes from all settings because nobody really knows what they experience or where they come from. And they don't know what it's like to come to another country and see all the different things. And they just, come here with fear and, just wanting to better their lives. And they might just have like, they face exploitation and just individuals like coming from to a different country. You're just, you want to be welcomed and you want to do the same things as others. And sometimes it's just so hard to do that because they face a lot of marginalization, and many individuals see them as, they see them as a different type of person, or they might see them as like how many immigrants are seen as like aliens or individuals that don't belong here. And you just see the challenges that they face when others migrate from other countries, and it's just unfair. And just many don't know what it's like to travel, to come to another country and feel not welcomed. So that just leads to so much fear within individuals. And we just see that in every day and as we progress in the conversation. But yeah.
Thank you all for getting us going there. And really, like I said, it sounds like we're going to go ahead and push to the conversations that are very much prevalent in our contemporary times when it comes to working with international communities, which is some of the current systemic level issues that we're dealing with here. And for folks that are that might not be as in or aware of, when we're looking at ASMR, we're looking at the audiosensory meridian response. So there was a video posted by the current administration, shared of individuals who were walking in shackles, I believe either leaving or boarding a plane going to Guantanamo Bay, immigrant individuals. And the intent was from that video, and I believe also as stated by the video, was the ASMR, the sound of, the shackles sound, to be able to create a positive sense for whomever was viewing it. So the idea was this sound of these individuals walking in these shackles is a good sound that increases or entices pleasure for whoever the audience is. And I'll say, I mean, the word grotesque comes to mind, and the idea not only of the treatment of individuals, but the idea that this should also be a pleasurable moment, right? However you view immigration, however you view the rules, the laws, whatever they may be, taking pleasure, I think, takes us to a different level of conversation. We're talking about what's the goal intended to be, right? We're looking at safety, that's one thing. Pleasure is a different conversation. I think that's one where, as Rebecca was mentioning, this became a different type of, not just sense, but what are we as human beings humanizing each other, taking the pleasure of an individual experiencing this, right? So yeah, so to that point, right, a lot of really great points mentioned here, especially to the sense of belonging, right? Coming into an area, regardless of whom came here first, whether you are a generational immigrant, where you are first generation, whether it's your parents, individuals who are coming into an area to support you, and at the very least to be integrated into a world around you, to be able to engage in a positive life, the ability to belong there. And I would say, I would imagine, if you're looking at the NASW and many other human rights and social justice organizations, some of the policies that we have right now don't necessarily fit to the concept of belonging when it comes to our immigrant communities and to our international communities. And why I titled this as international communities is because regardless of documentation status, there can be a sense of profiling or assumption or generalization or stereotypes that can come with an individual regardless of what your documentation naturalization status is. So when we're looking at policies right now that are challenging in the Supreme Court birthright citizenship, The most recent legislation that's coming through North Carolina that would go past HB 10's push for sheriff or force for sheriffs to cooperate with ICE agents, but also all state agencies to operate in a space where ICE is basically allowed to work with, and cooperation goes from not just sheriffs and police departments, but to the public safety, different types of organizations that are focusing on business and funding, a more connected sense of immigration naturalization services or ICE immigration services working within our state system intentionally. What does that look like as an immigrant? Again, regardless of status, as an individual with an international engagement, how does that, or how can that make someone feel? Whoever wants to start with this one, feel free to let us know, like, what do you think, or how do you know someone feels when it comes to these services that are working directly with our legal and our law services as well?
I can answer that. I think it
Right.
creates so much fear within the community, which can impact safety, well-being. It can impact individuals on so many different levels. So, like Hispanics who come to the US, they come either documented or undocumented. But if we're talking specifically about those who are undocumented, they're at a much higher risk of, let's say, exploitation because of the lack of quality jobs that are available to them due to their legal status. And then that fear of potentially being deported, especially now with all the mass deportations that have been happening this last month all around the country. That potential fear of being deported also holds many of them back from reporting like labor abuses or discriminations, which allows those employers to use that fear to their advantage and then continue to abuse and discriminate against them. And many Hispanic immigrants, Hispanic undocumented immigrants feel like this is something that they just have to put up. They kind of just have to put up with because it's either that or they get sent back to their home countries. And a common reason why many Hispanic immigrants do come to the US is because they believe that the opportunities that they can get here in the United States is more than what their home countries can potentially give them. So they usually will just tolerate this mistreatment, but that doesn't necessarily make it correct. And so I feel like there's just a lot of fear up in the air right now where a lot of individuals also don't feel safe to leave their homes. And like a lot of undocumented immigrants, and not just undocumented immigrants, but I'd also say documented immigrants, because racial profiling, is a real thing. Like ICE immigrants, like or ICE immigrants, ICE officers, they're not going to like look at you and automatically know, oh, they're here undocumented. They're here documented. Sometimes they will racially profile you. And that's just, it's reasonable fear. And so a lot of the Hispanic community, they may not feel comfortable sending their children to schools, or they may not feel comfortable enough to go to the grocery store to go and get the necessary supplies to go and make dinner for their family, or they may not feel safe enough to go to their job. So that just impacts them on so many different levels. And that could have like really, really negative effects. So it's a lot. I think it's just a lot up in the air with fear right now.
That's a really good point, James. I'm going to come to you next for this one, because you mentioned also, media-wise, there can be a generalization or stereotype that when we're talking about immigration, we're speaking of Latino, Latinx, Hispanic communities, at least, if not specifically, that's a big portion of the conversation of how it's taken up, but not solely, right? So we're looking at immigration and customs enforcement and that profiling that can happen. Chance, you mentioned, putting yourself out there when it came to your transition to naturalization status, and also opening the door in a conversation of saying it's not just one community we're talking about here, right? There might be one community that takes up a lot of media landscape, but the immigrant communities and the documented, undocumented communities, naturalized communities, they're very much more broad than we may know in itself. From your experience, has thinking of Cape Verde are individuals how are they thinking about the US right now if it comes to immigration, or if it comes to trying to be a part of the US? Is there any conversations that you're hearing of individuals, of their thoughts on some of the policies that we have in the United States right now?
Well, absolutely. Resonated a lot with what Rebecca was talking about. Number one, I'd like to say that it feels like racism, right? So that fear. So it's like, what does this feel like? It feels like racism. And so for anybody that's saying that this is just a wider conversation about immigration, no, let's be real and honest. It's targeting a particular group of people. It's targeting primarily Black and brown people. Let's just be honest about it. And it's targeting primarily Latino, Latinx people. Um, I just happen to be an African woman, and I can see what's happening in my community. My husband is a naturalized U.S. citizen. We met in Cape Verde, and then he came here. But even as a citizen, even as a naturalized citizen, the way that this conversation is shifting so rapidly has him thinking whether or not they will find reasons to revoke his citizenship, right? And so, which means that there may be a reason they'll revoke my citizenship too, because I'm a naturalized citizen, even though I've lived in this country and made significant contributions to this community for so long. But to answer your question, Matthew, um, I'm seeing a lot of conversations in my community in particular, on social media. Cape Verdeans use a lot of Facebook, and they use a lot of Viber and WhatsApp. I'm not going to go into details of what those conversations look like to protect the informal network of how the community is facing and dealing with it, and how we're supporting each other, right? I'm going to protect what they're doing right now. But the conversations are vast. There are a significant number of Cape Verdeans and Cape Verdean Americans who do and did support Trump, this president. So it's mixed, but we do know that a lot of Cape Verdeans, especially with those that are having some contact or a lot of contact with the legal system, are being deported, have been deported. But there's a lot of conversations on how we support those that are currently undocumented, or who are documented but are having contact with the legal system. Those who have green card, status, who are not naturalized citizens or even citizens, whatever reason. But there's a lot of conversation. There's a lot of fear, as Rebecca said, right? But this feels a lot like racism, and I will not be the one to be telling all the details on how how the community is moving, because at least I want to make sure to protect that. And they're using language. Let me just say, this is my last comment. One of the best ways that they're using it is most of the communication is happening in our native language of Creole to protect ourselves, and so that information and messaging is going out, it's protecting. Yeah. So it's happening, but it's racism, and it's fear mongering.
And again, I think that speaks to the space of belonging, because if you feel as though if you belong, not even if you're there yet, but that you're welcome, your culture is welcome, your humanity is welcome, we don't necessarily go to the same degree. That doesn't mean we don't talk in our natural language. Like we speak in our language of our community, whatever that might be, but not in the sense of, I want to make sure I'm not harmed, that someone can't use my words against me. So I'm going to use a language that's almost coded, right? And I think that's historically accurate to the United States when it comes to our treatment of Native and Indigenous Americans, that the language that we use becomes a defense against these oppressive and racist systems, to be able to allow us to still engage and still to be ourselves, and still try, right? To not stop. And we're not saying people have said, you know what, I see what's happening there, I'm not going to go, because maybe what's here offers something worse, and we can kind of go into why that might be. But we still try, we still engage, we just find a way that is more helpful to us than can be harmful, even using our natural languages, right? So Caroline, I want to switch to you here as well, because when we're looking at Palestine, and I don't want to keep out the conversation again of a very broad sense of what's going on in the world with our international communities. When we're looking at the current landscape, and there's a lot that's happened and still happening in that area. Can you speak to, from your perspective, what that looks like as a Palestinian American, as a Palestinian individual, what it looks like to be in these current states when it comes to how do we, as a society, see and support international communities?
Honestly, I don't know if some of you actually saw a post that Donald Trump put on Gaza. That was the most stereotypical, felt like shit, like it felt like a slap in the face when I was watching it, to be direct. Because he potentially wants to take Gaza. Let's just put that in record. The way how he uses, we will take over Gaza in a way where I already saw that coming. I already knew when he had conversations with the Prime Minister of Israel, it was coming. I don't know when they're gonna potentially do it, but the whole thing is like a slap in the face. And as someone who lives here, I still fear for my family all the time. I have family in the West Bank, but there's times where they deal with a lot of issues with the IDF. I had a family in Jenin. Jenin's going through a lot with like IDF soldiers coming in, bombing their houses. I actually had a family who had like house destruction from them, and it was really sad, but they're okay. Thank goodness. They're safe. But that's just an example of like, I have this like gut feeling that Trump really just wants to take Gaza and makes it a whole like kind of like a real estate turn. He is a quote unquote businessman, so he uses business terms a lot. And what he says is honestly, it could happen. And sometimes I do feel like alone. I hope I'm answering your question. It does feel like you are alone, and like there's people around you that support you, but they don't understand in a more close way, only if like you went through it. I feel even me as someone who lives here, I wouldn't know how it feels to live in Gaza and how they're literally living in tents and there's no food or no shelter or no like, you know, basic hygiene necessities. Like that's also another thing. So I think the only thing we can do is highlight what he is doing wrong and hopefully potentially letting the other big ups to kind of stop him, because this is unnecessary, really. And I think that post really was just kind of like a reality check or like a slap in the face to me. But yeah, that's all I have to say on that.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I understand like the topics we're have here, like this, we're gonna switch gears and get to more like this, I'll say like to diminish the needs, but we often talk about, when we talk about communities or groups and the means of a deficit, then we focus more on how we can support and how we can kind of almost bring this savior component to communities, as opposed to discussing the assets, who you are, what do you bring, and how these communities intentionally and uplift those around us. But the post Carolina is mentioning is where the current U.S. President Donald Trump mentioned displacing all of the inhabitants of Gaza or of Palestine outwards into other areas, Egypt, Jordan, wherever it may be, and to make it something that it's currently not, as far as using the real estate type language, right? We're going to uplift, we're going to make it this, I forget the language used, but making it a Middle Eastern kind of haven, but using language about construction, right? We want to displace and we want to rebuild. The idea there being, though, that it's land that isn't inhabited and it's land that can be taken over. And then the land is more important than the people. And the land is now occupied by the people. And it's very much considered to be a space of what's important and why. Why is Gaza currently in the shape that it's in? Why is the land currently being treated as it is, right? What brought it here as opposed to what's happening right now? So when we're looking at a people, and people across the entire globe in international spaces, when we're looking at the ethical ways of working with it, we have to consider all of these factors, right? Where there might be someone who is a refugee, a student, an individual who has no ties to any of the destruction that we may be talking about right now, that's just not from here, quote unquote, by birth. There's a lot that we have to consider of how do we just see them, right? Do we see them as the person in front of us with a background not of our own, still deserving of humanity, still deserving of engagement, still deserving of just, hey, let me learn about you. Let's talk. Like what? Not in a sense of let me judge you or pre-understand who you might be, but so I can learn, right? If we're looking at Charlotte right now or North Carolina, it's about 9% of 9% of the population of North Carolina is immigrants, right? Or have from an immigrant background, which might not sound like a lot, but when we're looking at the ability of, this goes back to I believe 2019, 2.1 million individuals working in the US education system, 1 in 8 individuals in education. There's a lot of the people in this country who encompass the work that we do from an immigrant status, either from an international community, an immigrant, naturalized, wherever they may be, someone who is not born of the United States. It has more to offer than just the work. So when we're looking at how people can switch this conversation, because we often see media posts about immigrant communities and why they should be supported based off of the economic value, which I'm not saying isn't important, but is that it? Is that all we're seeing is the job someone can do, their ability to fill in a gap that has been overwhelmed by money, right? So the low paying jobs are immigrants. Is that the value that we're talking about? Because it can't be all. And I'm going to ask you all, what else? What do people not see, right? What do people not see when they look and they hear about immigrant communities that they need to maybe tune their ears up a little bit more to understand the value past the economics of our society, but to the human quality and the human ability of all of us. Jocelyn, I'm gonna start with you there. From your thoughts, how can people see immigrants or international individuals as more than just economic value?
Well, for starters, I think they can try to put themselves in their shoes and think, oh, well, I come from this, I've been able to gain this, I grew up having all this, but not everyone has those same opportunities. We have to be able to understand other people don't come from the same things that we might come from, and they don't have the access to the same things that one individual might have. And it just comes to show how many people just look at somebody based off who they are and what language they speak, the color of their skin, or where they come from, or like what they wear. And they don't see the overall person, like their hard work, what they've done to be where they are. And, some people work twice as hard as an individual that might have everything, and they don't see past, oh, like, I did the same thing, but I had to work twice as hard to get where you are at. And it's just very, I would say, how earlier Teresa was saying how racism is very everywhere right now. And some people just don't see past their racism or their bias or just the way how they might use their oppression against others. And it just comes to show that, when you're speaking with an individual that doesn't have the same background as you should be able to see past who they are and understand that, oh, like, they might experience this or they might go through this, but I want to see them as a whole and not just by who they are or where they come from or how their physical characteristics are. And I feel like not many people see others that way. They just see from what they have and what comes to, like, a lot of people have privilege, and that privilege is you mainly used as like power to just oppress others and, just bring them down and make them seem like they're more better than others. But in essence, it's like if you want to be treated some way, I think you should treat others the same way you want to be treated. And, we should just all I know that it's very hard for others to come to the realization that we are not all the same, but I feel like with educating others and bringing awareness and just like talking conversations here and there about, oh, like, this is happening right now, or like this community is being affected. Like, what are your opinions on it? Or like, this is happening and for this reason, and just try to bring awareness to it. And even if we might tell others something and they might not see it the same way how we see it, at least we're able to let them see a different perspective on things and let them understand another view. And maybe they might take that view and see it in other places and understand that way. But as long as, we're talking about it and informing others, at least we're able to let them see, and wherever they go, they're going to see what we told them. So I think it's just important to just be able to see others just not by who they are, but the whole individual, and not just by their physical characteristics, which many people don't see. And they just might have an opinion because of what they heard, but you're not really understanding. You can't just hear things from other places and take it in and be like, oh yeah, like I believe that. No, like not everything is going to be correct. So yeah.
Right, that's fantastic, right? Talk about it, right? Open the doors to the conversation. Oftentimes we have limitations on like, what's the dinner table conversation? What's that Thanksgiving conversation? Putting the information out there intentionally to be able to see the human value in the person. And also, let's get uncomfortable intentionally, right? Let's challenge some perspective. Let's challenge some thoughts. Let's go past what you've heard or assumed. Let's go past those microaggressions, right? Those where are you from? Nah, here's where I'm from. Let me tell you about that. But let me tell you all about that. Let me give you all of it. Let me tell you what you may not have experienced because you've never been there before, but doing so intentionally to evoke conversation, to help learn, right? That's fantastic. Thank you, Jocelyn. Who else would like to share? Like how can people think past our stereotypes? Teresa, I see you're up there.
The sheer audacity that there's only economic contributions made, but nothing academic, educational, or just real world is baffling to me. Not even imagine, the thought that, for example, in the school system, right, that somehow international communities or immigrant communities, because that's really what we're talking about here, benefit more from our system, from the United States than, I think that it's a real disservice to think that Americans, for those who feel that they're American, whatever that means, don't benefit from the diversity that is to have people from all over the world, from different languages, socioeconomic status, from different races and ethnicities, sitting in the same classrooms at them, sitting in the same offices at them, professional settings. How that doesn't make our lives better, I'm not sure. That is the real contribution there, that you get to learn, to Jocelyn's point, you get to learn a different point of view when you have real conversations with people, right? When you get to meet someone from El Salvador, from Palestine, from Mexico, from Cape Verde, and you get to read, to hear about their stories, right? On how they were raised. That is the real contribution to the learning process. To me. And so the audacity that it only benefits the immigrants, that they're here in these United States, but not your child in the school system that has a classmate that is, like 3 years old, but now maybe, and so just the sheer audacity that there is little beyond economic contributions is crazy to me. When we all benefit, even I, as an African person, when I tell you that meeting African people from other African countries over my years at JCSU it's just been so amazing. Because, Africa, there's like over 40 countries, and I don't claim to know every detail about every single one of them. I'm sure South Americans will tell you exactly the same thing. And so, but the idea that my children's babysitters were from South Africa and were direct lineage. They were related to Nelson Mandela. I won't mention names. That I get to tell people that my children get to tell people that they were babysitting, their babysitters were Nelson Mandela's great grandchildren. And to me, that's such a fantastic story to tell, right? And that's because we were in this extremely diverse environment where we all coexisted and we had the opportunity to do so, to be in this beautiful international community. And it wasn't about how much money can you bring into this space or anything like that. I think people are missing the point because, to Rebecca's point, it's been such about fear and racism and what this particular moment in time is doing to us. We're moving more and more away from the beauty that is the American fabric, right? Like we're moving away from that and we're going now into fear mode that we're all retreating into our spaces and we're not talking to each other. And that is the danger. Instead of looking at it, wow, America has been the opportunity for us to learn because we all come from different places. Like nobody is truly from America other than indigenous populations. Let's just keep it real and 100. So people can just sit down, have several seats, and you know what I'm saying? Okay, I'll be quiet.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Absolutely. All right. We got 15 left, so we're gonna wrap this thing up. We'll start to, but I want to also hear from Caroline and Rebecca as well. Like, how can people, from your perspective, like knowing the world as it is and how it sees and how it kind of has this myopic view of individuals, how do we see past? What's something that people would benefit from at least being aware to? They probably already see it. It's right there in front of them. But what's the thing that people need to pay more attention to as they are seeing and hearing about different, diverse international communities?
I can go. Honestly, just to wrap what everyone said is like just seeing us as human. I think that's like the main thing. In all reality, one of my professors said it like yesterday, like we all bleed the same. We all have the same color red when we bleed. And I think some don't realize that at all. They just see what's on the outside and how we act or how we speak or what we show behind our culture. They see that, but they don't see the human behind it. And I think that's like the main thing that I wish people would just understand, that we are human, just like you. And just having conversations, like Professor Mills said, like the awkward Thanksgiving dinner, I will forever go through that. Um, that to me is something where we can all just sit down and kind of share a culture too. I feel like that's also another thing. And it just makes it beautiful and it shows like everyone's together. So that's probably what I would say we could start with.
Yeah, I agree with what everyone has been saying. I think when it comes down to it, we need to recognize that at the end of the day, we all are human. We all deserve empathy. It doesn't matter what the color of your skin is. It doesn't matter your background. It doesn't matter where you come from. We all deserve the same treatment regardless of looks and background. And yes, it is true that a lot of immigrants do tend to do the more labor-intensive jobs, which is why a lot of people do see immigrants as kind of just, yeah, like, like he'll like they can build my house, they can clean my toilet, like, they believe things along that nature. But at the same time, Americans love the diversity that we bring in, the food, they love our music, they love the art, the culture. Americans love celebrating Cinco de Mayo. There's Mexican restaurants like right around every corner. There's so many in Charlotte specifically, there's so many Arab coffee shops that Americans love to go to. So I think we need to recognize that we, as Americans, we can't just be picking and choosing the specific aspects that we want to take out of international communities. We need to respect everyone as a whole and value what we can bring to the table as a whole. It's not fair to just pick and choose. Okay, yeah, I'll take your food, but I don't actually value you as a person. I don't think that's fair in the slightest. So with that, it comes just recognizing and acknowledging the privilege that we have as Americans. Yeah, I'd like to end that there.
That's a great point that you made there, right? Because when we're looking at this, when we pass the transaction, I'll even harken back to what, 2020 or so during the pandemic. It felt like there was a moment that we were moving towards a more collective view of society, as in, what do people need? We're all facing this pandemic. We're all facing this COVID-19. We're all facing like this collective concept of it isn't just about some, it's about everyone, and how do we all get through this? And unfortunately, in the whiplash effect that we have in society, it seems like we're kind of pushing back to ours. Now, what do I get back? What do I get from this? What do I get from this transaction, right? To the point of, is it just the food that you're partaking in, or is there a cultural aspect or a thing that brought that food to you? Is there literally something that you can't get from where you are that food, that restaurant, that person brings in? And it's amazing that when we look at those jobs, as Rebecca mentioned, like you can clean my house, you can do all the things that might help me build, but we don't realize how intimate those jobs are and that work is. Like, you give someone access to the most bare of yourself without realizing that you're asking them to do something that you wouldn't ask anyone else to do, right? You can say it's for the money, but you're trusting that they come into your space with the authenticity of being able to do something for you that you can't get from someone else, and that they just leave it at that. Whatever they may see, hear, think about, that they take you at your wholest sense. But do we do the other side? When we're talking about women's health, safety, and well-being yesterday, the conversation when it comes to a time for men of, well, I have a daughter, a sister, a mother. We bring in that visual when it helps us make our point. But do we bring in when it helps to support them? Do I talk about my mother when I'm talking about women's healthcare? Do that immigrant community that I love Taco Tuesday, but do you talk about them in the best sense when we're talking about their community's access to support, to be able to not just have that food, but to have them here to provide and continue to do whatever they want to do, provide, to live, to whatever it might be? Do we take the transaction past the point of what I get from it to also, hey, you brought something I never would have had without you, so therefore I need you, right? Do we remember that aspect? Teresa?
As you're saying this, I realized that I was getting upset because the sheer thought, and I think I saw this on the Q&A, the sheer thought that every few years, depending on what's going on with leadership and policies, that I, as an immigrant, have to prove my humanity to people, it makes my blood boil, right? Not just like all of us here on, most of us here on the screen, and like we have that connection to communities. The fact that immigrant communities, because of what the media, like first leadership, political leadership, then we know policies. Every few years, there's something that forces us, right, to justify our humanity and why we exist in spaces, right? And that to me is mind-boggling, and it I mean, it just downright like pisses me off that I have to explain why I belong here, belong beyond. And then if anyone is going to sell the idea to me that this is not like this is not based on like racism, to Rebecca's point about the idea that like no American wants to do the jobs that the Mexicans are doing, for example, right? If this is not just strictly based on racist, philosophy and thinking, it's ridiculous. And so I need us to stop that. And I'm going to say this. At this point, I don't need folks to like empathize or any of that. When I say I mean all of us collectively. We need the respect. And we need bold leaders that are going to take a stand and stand on policies and laws to protect these communities. So miss me with the compassion if you want to, because compassion doesn't bring me safety, right? Compassion doesn't put food on my family's table. So if we're keeping it all the way 100, miss me with all of that. But show your compassion and show your respect and show your support by making phone calls to the lawmakers, to the people, to the movers and shakers that are going to make decisions that will stick, that will support the children, the parents, that will make sure that ICE doesn't come into the school system trying to separate families. So I know I started the conversation with compassion, understanding, and all of that, but I am ending this conversation by saying, miss me with all of that, but put your policies and laws and all of that where your money, like, put that into, make those phone calls and make that happen. Fight for us. Fight the way that we as immigrant communities have been fighting in this country to keep this country what it is right now. So fight for us for once.
Take those thoughts and put them to action. Absolutely. Justin, I think I saw a hand up. Rebecca, you're
Yeah.
more than welcome. We got a few minutes here. We're gonna wrap up and kind of like give a brief after these comments here. Thoughts on how do we support? Because Teresa's already given some thoughts here, but we'll get some more of that here in the next few minutes. But we'll start with Jocelyn and then go to Rebecca next.
Yeah, exactly like how Teresa was saying, I want you to do more than just speak, like actually do the actions that you want to do. Like if you're like how Rebecca was saying, like all the food and everything, like there's so many Americans that go to Hispanic, like Mexican restaurants. There's so many Americans that, have people who come and clean their house, have gardeners who come and mow their lawn. Like those are all Hispanic people working these jobs because nobody else is going to work these jobs. When we see the mass deportations happening, we're going to see a decline in farming. We're going to see a decline in construction. We're going to see a decline in people not cleaning houses. And then who's going to do that work? And then there's going to be complaints about the issues, but it's like, that's what's happening because you're deporting everyone. So nobody's going to do the dirty work that people say. And it's like, well, if you're seeing all this happening and you're mad about it, well, speak on it and like do something about it, not just only say that, oh, like, yeah, like I support Hispanics because, I love this and this and that about them, but you want to be able to do more than that. Don't just say it, like do the actions to do, like call, make the phone calls, speak on matters, like educate others who don't know the topics or who say something that is like not correct. And it's like, if you're over here doing all these things, well, you should also be doing the same actions, just like you've been supporting the whole time. So, yeah.
Rebecca.
Yes, I agree with what both Teresa and Jocelyn have been saying. I think it is important to have compassion to some extent, but at the same time, don't just sit there and see something that you don't agree with and just think, wow, that sucks. And then you just go about your day. You need to, I think, actually immerse yourself into the role. And I think you can, or I think genuine help can be done on like our kind of level by supporting community organizations. So like, for example, with all the mass deportations that have been taking place, not just all around the country, but or not just in Charlotte, but all around the country, there's been a lot of community organizations that have been organizing protests around the country, as well as in Charlotte. So like I've been putting my part in by going to a couple of protests that are against mass deportations and are pro-international communities. So like, for example, there's Charlotte United for Palestine, and there's a Party for Socialism and Liberation, which they help organize these protests and these volunteer events where you can go in and just learn more about the cause and really put your part in if that's something that you are interested in. And for me personally, I think it's been really, really nice to see these very genuine organizations organize these kind of events for the community because they come from different backgrounds and they're all getting together to fight for a similar cause regardless of their backgrounds. So yeah, if anyone's interested in that, I think getting involved in and getting involved with community organizations would be something that's very helpful.
All right. just to add on to what Rebecca was saying, there is going to be a protest this Monday at First Ward Park at 6 p.m. So if anybody's interested in that, we will be protesting against mass deportation and Palestinians as well.
Fantastic. Just off for a timestamp, if you are watching this after 2/28, you may have missed that moment, but that does not mean that you can't be involved, right? And I say that just because, this is going to be recorded, people can watch this later on, but to the point of action. And as in the Q&A, we had some comments there from Rachel about, all right, let's the human experience, and like we got to create change, radical change, right? Yeah, like that. I don't really know that there's much more that needs to be said with that. When we're looking at the needs of the communities, because it could be UNICEF, it could be the UN, it could be working in a space where individuals exist separate of the United States and separate of any of these conditions. We have to be able to understand change has to occur to be able to support those communities, whatever that looks like. That could look like downloading the 5 Calls app and having a quick way to be able to get contact with your reps. It could be having the conversation at Thanksgiving dinner. It could be knowing that microaggression of, hey, can you just say that language a little bit slower for me? No, we got to do something, right? What you've heard here today, I hope, even though I know like these are somber times right now, right? I'm done with trying to encourage conversations from our panelists and guests that uplift the people on the outside, right? Y'all are giving your time, your energy, your lives to be able to share information. So if you find this to be a conversation that just kind of hits in a awkward place, we invite you to do something with that on your own. Not inviting the individuals within the community to help you process whatever you may feel, but to be able to go into your own world, into your own space, into your own community, and understand, why do I feel like this and what can I do about it, right? That's where change starts, but it doesn't have to stop there. So you've heard some examples of, I think we had some talk in, Rebecca, I'm going to close with you here. If we have, because we talked about ICE and Immigration Customs Services, and there are currently mass deportations happening across the United States. For individuals who might be dealing with, or just kind of navigating that space, can you offer some information on how they can deal with or navigate the world regarding immigration services right now?
Yeah, I feel like a lot of Hispanic immigrants aren't aware of the rights that they have because, they might think, oh, well, I'm undocumented, like what rights do I have? And it's not, like the media is kind of showing us like, oh, Hispanic immigrants are dangerous, they're aliens. So it kind of reinforces this idea that we are dangerous people, but that is not the case. And so we do have rights. Hispanic immigrants do have rights. So like if you're stopped by ICE, you have the right to remain calm. Don't resist. Don't run. Don't resist. Don't argue. Don't fight. You do have the right to remain silent. You don't have to answer any questions regarding your immigration status. It's important to remember not to give any false documents because this could get you into more trouble. And you do have the right to refuse a search unless ICE does have a signed warrant from a judge. You do have the right to not let them into your home or to allow them to search your car. So if you were to be in that situation, ask to see a signed warrant. And then you also do have the right to request a lawyer for any representation or to answer any questions before you get involved with ICE. So I think it's just important to, be aware, know of these things to like fully protect ourselves as best as we can, especially during a time that's as difficult as it is currently.
Thank you so much. Again, thank you to all the panelists. Thank you for all in attendance. We will be doing more of this, right? So these are the primary events. This is it for before spring break. After spring break, we're gonna have some more events coming up. You will all have access to, and we'll follow up, in the future for how you can engage with and impact not just the communities we talked about today, but RASE in the work that we're doing as well. So thank you to the panelists. Thank you to those in attendance. Thank y'all to whoever watched this video on the other side who wasn't here today. Appreciate it. Please share, please engage with us. And we will see you soon. Live with love, walk with grace. Take care, people.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
Thank you.
guys. You guys did so good.